Well, some of you may have wondered where I have been the last few months. Well, I took on a temporary work assignment, and now I'm back. And I did hear an interesting comment one of my last few days of work, and it was, well, you can't really hate someone unless you've loved them first. Bizarre. Let's talk about it on Azimuth Podcast. I'm Kimberly McNabb, and with me is Barrett McNabb.
Well, Kimberly, it's so glad to have you back. I'm really happy to have you back in the studio. So yeah, that was kind of an interesting comment that you said. So can you give us a little bit of background of how it came about?
Well, it was about a fairly benign subject. Like I hate avocados, or
okay.
I hate plaid, or something to that effect. But I was like, I don't know. I unlike the Austin Madcliffe father, I think if someone murders my child, many people would say, I'm going to hate that MFer, if not kill them.
Right.
Or, many young people had never heard of Donald Trump before 2016, but you know what? They're sure happy to hate on him. Of course, much of the media enabled that sentiment. So,
they kind of poisoned the well, I feel.
Exactly.
They kind of poisoned the well on that one.
Just a little bit. So anyway, I was like, where on earth would someone come up with such a crazy thought? I mean, I don't need to have loved something to hate it. I hate avocados and I hate olives. I've never loved them, never will. And many of us hate actual Adolf Hitler, even though most of us have never met him, right? So I looked it up. Actually, philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche said the same thing. And now he did say some things that make sense, like whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Except the infantry. So in the Army, we actually have a phrase like that. When I saw that you were going to talk about that during the podcast, that which does not kill you makes you stronger. Except the infantry. The infantry will kill you. That was something that's just ingrained in the infantry. We say that all the time.
Well, I've heard of many of your hiking expeditions on in South Korea, up and down all the hills I can't even imagine. So yes, I can believe that sentiment. I was thinking more of ice cream. It's not going to kill me, and it definitely won't make me stronger.
Right.
But he did say some other things I don't agree with, like God is dead.
Sure.
But as Michael Knowles observed about a week ago in one of his podcasts, he said he was a great observer for his time, but he was wrong just about everything. So, actually, another person said the exact same thing. Nicholas Sparks, the author of The Notebook.
Yeah, famous rom-com writer.
And the villain of many straight men's existence,
right.
Having to sit through that movie. But he wrote that in his book, The Last Song. So Nietzsche and Nicholas Sparks are two things I never imagined I'd utter in the same sentence.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of interesting. One of the things when you initially said that the person says, you have to
love someone first before you can hate them.
I think you
feel
said
betrayal.
Yeah, I think you said you have to love something before you can hate it.
I've seen both online.
Both online?
Something or someone.
So here's how I can see their point. I can see their point, except I'm going to change one word in that sentence, and I'm going to remove the word love, and I'm going to put care. You have to care about something before you can hate it. And
that makes sense.
And so, you have to care about food and eating, and then you can hate avocados. Because I like steak, I don't like avocado. No, I love avocados. I love just about everything. But you have to care about, the Mediterranean diet. But I don't want avocados in my Mediterranean diet, right? So I hate avocados. So I was thinking about when I was a company commander, I had a young first lieutenant who was a signal corps officer. So that's a communications specialist in the Army. And so I'd ask her questions similar to what my company commander, who was an infantryman and I was an infantry lieutenant, would say, what's the maximum distance of a TOW missile launcher? what's the minimum safe distance for a 60 millimeter mortar with a risk estimate distance of less than 1%. And it's because you need to be a subject matter expert in your weapons and equipment, right? You need to be able to do it. So a Signal Corps officer needs to be able to establish communications for a battalion or a brigade or even a division, and is supposed to monitor bandwidths and supposed to do line of sight analysis and know where dead spots would possibly be through terrain analysis and things like that. So I would ask her, what various ranges of radio systems were, how to do some of the encryption, because radios such as the SINGARs or MBITR, they not only do they have frequency hopping, which they jump from band to band. What that does is prevents jamming from happening, but also there is encryption that goes on, so that even if a enemy is able to get the correct timing as the radio is jumping from frequency to frequency, they're not able to listen in because it's encrypted. So I would ask her those kind of questions, and she wouldn't know the answer. And I say, okay, well, go find out the answer and come back and tell me. It's not a problem in the military if you don't know the answer. You just need to say, I don't know, but I'll go find out for you. And so anyway, she was talking to my executive officer, who was also an infantryman, and was kind of complaining that I was asking these questions. And his response to her, he came back and told me what he said, but his response to her was, I thought, very mature and very profound. And he said, the reason he's asking these questions, these hard questions of you, is because he cares. It's because he cares. If he didn't care, he wouldn't talk to you.
Right.
And so then she had the realization that I'm asking those questions not to play stump the chump. I'm asking those questions to make sure that she had a continuous stream of professional development, so that she would get to her next unit and be squared away and be able to know how to do line of sight analysis and know where dead spots were and to know where to put repeaters for radios.
People could die.
Well, yeah, that's an unfortunate result of being in the Army, is that oftentimes people die.
If someone's not good at their job, other people could die.
Yeah, but still, I mean, it goes to this thing. You can't hate something unless you don't care. And so this was an instance. The man doesn't hate you, because she's like, the company commander,
he's picking on me.
Captain McNabb he hates me, and he's like, he doesn't hate you. He cares about you. And so it got to be to the point where I was able to have those professional development conversations. But as soon as you said that, if I replaced, you can't hate something unless you love it first. If you just change that to care, because again, a child isn't going to have an innate hatred of Adolf Hitler, to your point.
Right, like our 8-year-old has no idea who that is.
Yeah, but if and when he cares about history and he cares about learning about World War II and humanity, but still, once he if he becomes a history buff and cares about, yeah, but cares about history and cares about the subject of World War II, then he would probably wind up hating Hitler. But if you never care about learning history and just that's not important to me, then you're probably not going to have those strong feelings about the antagonists in a particular conflict.
I want to carry that one step further. So say if a random person comes up to me on the street and calls me a racist or whatever, I'm like, okay, I don't care. And actually, one place I worked, people would say kind of silly things or outrageous things, and I hadn't been there that long, and that there are some of the few people in my life who would go, you don't get frazzled easily. I'm like, I don't think anyone's ever said that to me before. But I'm like, that's because I don't care about the subject.
Yeah.
and because you haven't really earned for me to care about your opinion yet, especially when it comes to non-work related things. And now if it comes to work related things, yeah, I might get upset or, I'll care. And I think that's one reason why it's so easy for couples to upset each other more, because they can say the exact same thing to someone else, like, nitpick a detail about someone, the way they do things, or they don't, get rid of enough stuff or, whatever, how they get ready in the morning or whatever. And if it's someone that may be accompanying them on the trip, like you're going on a retreat with a bunch of people for a religious group or something, you
Sure.
just met this person that you're bunking with like 6 other people and they say something, you may not care that much. Your spouse says something about it. Next thing you know, you're not talking for 3 days. It can be the exact same thing.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. Again,
Because you care about their opinion.
because you care.
So
And
the more upset they are, guess what? That means they care about your opinion.
yeah. So, I mean, that's where I can say, if you replace that word, you can't hate something unless you love it first. You can maybe say that about human beings and people and stuff like that, to your point, because, obviously we're in love and we're married and we have a great, family and wonderful children. You do such a great job as being a mom. But again, I think you get to widen it to more subjects if you remove love and put care in there. You can't hate something unless you care about it. And effectively, you're talking about caring about the subject, I think is important. So, but I thought that was really, that was really kind of interesting. I mean, do you remember what the context was?
No, it's been something benign.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess that makes sense.
But who thought a random 24-year-old would spark such an interesting discussion?
No, because like I said, oftentimes Kimberly and I, we sit at the kitchen table and she's having a glass of wine and I'm having a beer, or sometimes I have a glass of wine as well, or a scotch or something like that. And we talk about these things. And so, for us to have a conversation, this is a continuation of our conversation in sharing this with you. And so these are things that we really actually talk about. And we're just glad to be able to have a platform to be able to bring you into the conversation. Tell me in the comments what you think. If it's, you can't hate something unless you love it first. If you transfer or transpose the word care instead of love, if that phrase makes sense, and how do you feel if it's in your life? But thank you so much for tuning into Azimuth Podcast, and please stay tuned after these messages.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy our show with all of the stories we share, we would love your support.
And it's as easy as clicking that subscribe or follow button. This will ensure you never miss an episode and keeps us bringing you these important stories. Your support makes a huge difference. Thank you so much for being part of our podcast family.
Thanks, and keep tuning in.
So the Supreme Court just heard oral arguments from a group of parents who are suing a Maryland school district for controversial books being read to their children, and they want to opt out. Now, this seems like it's a great win for parents because it seems as though the Supreme Court is looking at ruling in their favor, but we'll have to wait and see until, June?
Yes, it's expected in June.
Okay. Well, I'm Barrett McNabb, and with me is Kimberly McNabb. And let's let Martha McCollum talk to Randy Weingarten, who is the president of the Teachers Union, and what their thoughts are going on in this case.
So joining me now, glad to have with us today Randy Weingarten, president of the American Federation of Teachers. Randy, nice to have you with us. Thank you very much for joining me. I know that you don't want to address this case specifically because you don't have teachers who are involved in it, but just in a broader sense in terms of this issue of these books and their impact across the board, you have really talked about protecting books of all kinds in Florida and other places across the board. So do you think twice when you listen to some of these examples of what's being read to 4 to 6-year-olds?
So, Martha, first off, thank you for having me on, and I hope that we get to all the other issues in terms of education. But I would say that this is a hard case because parents, of course, have rights in terms of educating their kids, and schools have to be communities. And the moment you have a case like this with such great distrust for what is being taught in a classroom or read in a classroom, I consider that a failure from the beginning. And I say this as someone who is a gay person who understands that we have to actually make sure that families are respected and families are safe and kids are safe, and that differences are acknowledged and differences are embraced. But once you get a case like this where parents are uncomfortable about what is being read to their kids in a classroom, this is something that has to be dealt with in a local level, not in the Supreme Court. And so parents have rights, and they should have rights in terms of what is being taught in classrooms. And, and we're going to have to actually deal with how we ensure that kids have a safe and welcoming environment, and that we see differences and we accept differences, whether those differences are religious or whether those differences are sexual, and that we actually make sure that the community is there as a community. So
do you believe, though, that there's an appropriate age to have a discussion? These are 4 to 6-year-olds, and they're being read, and this is out loud in the classroom, not just, oh, this is a book on the shelf in the library. If there's a particular child that, you might want to read this with, but, just as an example, my pronouns are like the weather. They change depending on how I feel, and that's okay because they're my words. Sometimes I use all the pronouns I can think of, just as one example here.
Let me put it this way,
Go ahead.
Martha, and I think that this will be shocking to you. These would not be the books I would be reading as a classroom teacher to kids who are 4 to 6 years old. Yeah. And I say this, I went through the New York City public school system. I was a teacher during when we had the big issue around Heather Has Two Mommies. And I think when you don't actually make sure that things are age appropriate, and we don't actually have sufficient conversations with teachers and parents in terms of how we accept differences, then you have situations like this right now.
Wow, that was something that I did not expect Randy Weingarten to say, but it is refreshing to see that she also agrees that these books should not be read to 4 to 6-year-olds.
I have a number of issues with some things that she said. First of all, failed to deal with at a local level should not be dealt with at the Supreme Court level. You failed to deal with it at a local level.
Exactly.
So it had to be brought up. And,
Yeah, can we just talk about that real quick? So, you're absolutely right. School boards, when you have teachers stand up in front of school boards and they're complaining about things, and school boards say, you're being hateful, your time is up, officer, escort them out, and then a parent's removed, I would say it's not being dealt with at the local level. So it has to get elevated.
Yes, and that's why it is being brought to the Supreme Court level. And, she said, well, I wouldn't read this at, for 4 and 6-year-olds. But wasn't she Joe Biden's head of education? So,
right.
Yeah, maybe she personally would not have allowed, would not have read it to 4 or 6 years old, but she damn sure would have allowed it.
Right.
And, I just think if we can only talk religion at home, why can't we just talk sex at home?
That's a great point.
They're 4 to 6 years old. They should have no idea what sex is.
And
none whatsoever.
That's an interesting point, Kimberly, because specifically Maryland schools allow parents to opt out of sex education in the school district, but they wouldn't
not sexualized books for
but not sexualized books. So that was one of the arguments that the parents made. There's already a historical precedent for various things, such as sex education, for parents to opt out and say, I want to teach that at home. Why couldn't the Maryland school district give the same courtesy to these sexualized books for 4 to 6-year-olds?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, as far as I alluded to at the beginning of this episode is this a win for parents? And I think a lot of parents would say yes, but you and I were talking about this, and I don't see this as a win for parents. This is the Supreme Court giving parents back the right that they should never have had taken away to begin with. But furthermore, it normalizes this particular behavior. What should happen is that the Supreme Court and the federal government should force school districts to have opt-in programs, not opt-out. So what you have is a school classroom, and the teachers want to read a pronoun book, or even during the Supreme Court case, Justice Kavanaugh was referencing some of the books where there was leather and bondage and things like that. And he's like, I don't want to make sure that we're all on the same sheet of music as we're referring to these books. But here the parents are fighting for the ability to opt out. So the book is going to get read to the class at large. of which, when you look at transgenderism and a book where a particular book was mentioned where a girl was a tomboy, and then in the middle of the book she decides she's a boy, tells her mom she has the biological girl who's now supposedly being called a boy by the mom. The brother is confused, and the mother hugs both of them and says, well, it is a little confusing, but it's all just love. So that book is being geared towards transgenderism, which is 1% of the population, which means that
they just want to recruit because they can't reproduce. They're just trying to recruit. And second of all, it's not about love. It's like, okay, you're going through a confusing time
right.
in your life. Why? We could talk all day about that, but I love you as your mom, and I'll help you work this out. Okay, there you can throw in the word love, but it's not about love. No.
Well, I mean, yeah. So I mean, but the point that the justices on the conservative side were trying to make is, here you are, or at least the point that I'm trying to make is that 1% of the population is transgender, which means that just basic math tells you that 99% of the population is not. Do I get a cookie for getting that math problem right? So anyway, they're gearing a book to be read to the class at large that only addresses 1% of the population. And so parents have the ability, they're fighting for the ability to opt out of that happening. In my opinion, it should be an opt-in. If there's a parent who has a 1% child who's transgender and wants to be read a book, it should be opt-in, and the book should be read in a different setting. There's no reason to expose the 99% of the parents and school children to be read about an issue that only affects 1% of the population at maximum. But still, this should be an opt-in versus an opt-out, because now what if a parent doesn't get the memo, right? And their child's exposed to something that they would not have wanted to do.
That's another issue. They, up until March of 2023, they had the option to opt out, but with removing that option, they also removed informing parents at all that these books were being read. Yeah. So double whammy there, but
again, that's where opt-in would address that small, intentionally small segment of the population that this is affecting anyway, rather than exposing the 99 at large.
So considering majority percentages, right? So I think it's later on in this interview she mentions, Christian parents. This is not just an evangelical Christian parent issue.
Right.
Okay. You have Jewish parents, you have Muslim parents, and you have Christian parents fighting against this. So congratulations. You have brought peace amongst the Jewish, the Muslims, and the Christians. Way to go. You brought them together.
Exactly.
And altogether, that represents 57% of the Maryland population, according to the 2020 census.
Okay.
So for a group that wants to claim, oh, we want inclusivity, you're certainly excluding a large percent of the population.
Right.
And so, anyway, the reasons why they got rid of the opt-out, availability is teachers were saying, oh, well, it resulted in high absenteeism. I wonder why. Because people didn't want to hear it. Right. Second of all, the teachers were claiming it was just infeasibly possible to do the opt-out. And then three, risking students who thought the books did represent them, like expose those students. And it reminds me of the video rental stores, like we're really dating ourselves here with Blockbuster.
Blockbuster.
Yes, we both owned a Blockbuster rental card. No, we don't still have it. I hope you don't still have yours.
No, I don't have it anymore.
So anyway.
I do think I still have a late fee from 1989.
Maybe some of our smarter listeners can calculate the inflation on that one. But anyway, I don't think Blockbuster had the back room with the beads and stuff, but the mom and pop rental stores, they'd have this back room, with the door frame, and it would have the beads, and it would have
only section.
It would have a piece of paper duct taped to the side of the door frame saying you must be 18 or older to enter. And that's where the stuff that not everyone could agree on was appropriate, belonged. And then everything everyone else could agree on belonged in the main center up front in the store. And
Sure.
I just feel like society today, I mean, there are regular merchandise stores that are having like dildos up front amongst the regular merchandise.
Right.
It's
And
like-
regardless of your sexual orientation, that's not appropriate.
Like, God forbid you go get some produce with your child or go get some migraine medicine with your child, and then there's a dildo right there on the shelf with everything. I'm like, hello, we have Adam and Eve stores for a reason. But I just feel like it's opposite. Like all the decent stuff, it's like C-Spot Run's going to be in the back with the beaded, door frame, and then, kinky bondage stuff up front.
Right. And again, the justices see this. I mean, obviously, this is going to be an ideological decision. The liberals are always they never come over to the conservative side. It's always
They always got to push.
The conservatives become moderates and will often cross ideological lines in order to be correct jurists, whereas the liberal judges on the Supreme Court never come over to the conservative side. They stay ideologically firm. So you're going to see, a decision that's going to fall straight among ideological lines with the 6-3. But it's interesting to see that there were some sparks where Justice Alito was speaking, and Sotomayor tried to interrupt him, and he's like, "Hey, let me finish speaking." And usually there's not this much, if you want to call that energized language in what's normally a stuffy Supreme Court. This was definitely one that got the justices a little fired up. But again,
Well, I hope so.
Yeah, but again, when Justice Kavanaugh, was talking and saying, I just want to make sure we're talking about the books that have leather and the books that have bondage and the books that are, doing all this weird stuff that is just not appropriate for children. It's just really not appropriate for children, and he gets it. And even the attorneys for Maryland were like, "Yep, no, we love all that stuff," and I mean, it just I have a strong suspicion that there's going to be a 6-3. Maybe I will be proven wrong that there will be one of the three liberal justices will come to their senses and come over. But I think it's going to be 6-3 in June, and it's going to be in favor of the parents. But again, I don't see this as a win.
No.
It's a step.
We shouldn't have this argument.
We shouldn't be having this argument. It's a step in returning the rights that should never have been taken away from parents. That's fine, but really we should be talking about opt-in availability into school systems rather than opt-outs.
And personally, I think the opt-in is, hey, parents, you want your kids to learn that stuff? That's on you. It's called Amazon.
Yeah, exactly. So thanks so much for tuning into this episode of Azimuth Podcast, and please stay tuned after these messages.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy our show with all of the stories we share, we would love your support.
And it's as easy as clicking that subscribe or follow button. This will ensure you never miss an episode and keeps us bringing you these important stories. Your support makes a huge difference. Thank you so much for being part of our podcast family.
Thanks, and keep tuning in.